Hello everybody and welcome to the Collegiate Esport Commissioners Cup 2022. Once again, I'm still Septulence, but this time I am joined by the CEO of New Street, Eric, who's going to get to tell us about NFTs, which I'm really excited because I told you this before the interview. I know nothing. I'm like a newborn baby about this.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear kind of about what you do, and then we can talk a little bit more about the esports side of things.
Yeah, so absolutely. We'll get into the NFT side in a second. But just to quickly explain what I do.
Yeah, of course.
Eric Witchen, thank you for the intro. CEO of New Street. And New Street is a media and analytics platform for collectors. So you can think about it as like the world of collectibles has grown significantly over the last 5 to 10 years. And what's happened is we've had a lot of marketplaces evolve. So places that are going to sell you things. Like if I want to buy a pair of sneakers, I have to go to no less than 10 to 12 websites in order to figure out the best price. So you know, the value proposition for us starts with, you know, as a collector, where can I buy these things on the internet and where can I get the best deal possible? And then furthermore, we add media and insights, you know, sort of like a financial technology company would do, but around things that I personally care about a lot more than stocks.
Right.
So that's us.
Absolutely. So looking at it, you know, NFTs being one thing, esports being the other.
Yeah.
Where's the link?
Yeah.
Where's the connection there?
So first off, let's demystify NFTs a little bit.
Oh yes, please.
So first of all, an NFT is the first time in human history that we've been able to prove that something digital is scarce.
Yeah.
You need to take that in for a second. So basically, you know, we've been creating things on the internet and with digital art and otherwise for many, many years. We're buying in-game items, we're doing a bunch of things, and we've been taught that because you can copy and paste those things, they have no value, right? Enter the blockchain, and the blockchain allows us to be able to prove that something digital is truly owned by one particular person.
Sure.
So you can copy and paste that thing as many times as you want,
is it
but
like
you
a
don't own it.
certificate then?
It's absolutely like a certificate of authenticity, certificate of ownership that could represent a digital asset or a physical asset just as equally.
Right.
There are people playing with this in real estate markets. I mean, so you know, collectibles, you know, is just one of the areas that this thing is interesting in. But in terms of esports, I think it connects very much to. You know, when you think about all the work that you do as a gamer in these ecosystems, what happens if one day this ecosystem, this company that controls this ecosystem no longer exists? All your in-game assets and all the things that you've worked so hard no longer exist too. And so, of course, you know, the primary use case of these assets in ecosystem are going to be within the ecosystem, maybe forever. But it'd be really nice to be able to pull them out of the ecosystem, own them separately, and so if those companies are foregone, you know, go by the wayside someday, you still have these things to say, hey, I used to play this game, it was a lot of fun, and so that's really where I think the value comes in.
Okay, so that's
preservation of value, so to speak.
Yeah, so that's a great kind of segue into the other part. You've got all these positives, so people that are looking at it, they're kind of shaking their head a little bit. They're like, oh, this is going to be damaging, this can be harmful.
Of course.
What is kind of the counterpoint to that, I guess?
Of course. The counterpoint is that I think the misperception is these NFT games are coming to take gaming away from gamers, or the fun out of games.
Wow.
And the fact of the matter is that's like a lot of the current NFT gaming is more of a replacement for casino gambling than it is for anything else.
Sure.
I mean, these are not meant to be competitive with the games that you guys are playing here, and shouldn't be seen as such. So it's almost like two completely different industries.
Okay.
You know, the graphic engines and all the things that are behind the scenes on these things, they're just not there yet. I mean, if you look at you know, it looks like some of these look like Minecraft 10 years ago.
Right.
But that being said, really, it's the connectivity to economics, to the rest of the web and whatnot that makes a lot of these things really more interesting.
Sure.
And those things haven't even happened yet.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So it's to kind of pull us away from the esport back to the NFT kind of topic. And you and I did discuss this a little bit before the interview, is people are often talking about how NFTs can be damaging or harmful to kind of the real world, literal environment, the environment itself. So what is kind of, for somebody, you know, compared to me who knows nothing, someone who actually knows what's up with NFTs, what's the stance on that?
Yeah, so absolutely. So it's one of the most strongest negatives about NFTs right now is the carbon footprint that these blockchains leave. And just to get not too technical, but just to talk really quickly through it, there's these things that essentially are used to confirm transactions. It's called a consensus mechanism. Okay. Essentially, it's how do you prove that the ledger is accurate?
That it happened,
right? And so Bitcoin and Ethereum currently use this thing called proof of work. Okay. And that uses a lot of energy, tons of energy. I mean, energy of small countries. So I do agree that on a per user basis, the electricity that's being used right now by the network is absolutely higher than it should be. That being said, Ethereum in particular is going through a change this year that's going to reduce the emissions by something like 99.5%.
Wow.
So it's really like, it's kind of like one of those things that is a current problem, but that problem gets solved really quickly.
Right.
And I sometimes question the areas that these narratives come from. Because when you think about it, right, like negative narratives tend to come from industries that don't want something to succeed. And you look at the things like crypto industries or whatnot. And there's a lot of industries that stand to lose if crypto wins. So I'll just leave it at that. But there's a lot of false narratives being perpetuated, especially around the environment. And the fact of the matter is whereas they are currently concerns, they very quickly become non-concerns.
Sure.
And a lot of actually the current blockchains that are being used actually already uses consensus mechanism.
Okay.
So really take very, very, very little power.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, are you afraid that even after they fix this, the 99% goes on,
Sure.
Are you afraid that's going to damage the longevity of this idea, of this concept?
I think that it has the potential to, right?
Sure.
Because we're still in the early adoption phase.
Right.
And so anytime you get a narrative as strong, especially environmental ones, which I am very attuned with, environmental concerns, it alienates a large group of people. So there are groups of people, that like lobbyists for all intents and purposes that are taking the counterpoint and are essentially lobbying for the crypto industry. So lobbyists everywhere, basically.
Yeah, and I guess, so we've covered the NFT portion, we've covered a little bit of the gamer portion, but a gamer watching this, somebody gaming,
Absolutely.
Where's the benefit for them? What's the benefit of kind of the gaming NFT?
Absolutely. So I would say right now, very little. I'll be honest with you.
Sure.
But it's coming. And where it's coming is in the ability to own these in-game items and digital objects that you worked so hard to collect, that commemorate things that you've done, things that you've won. It connects to a lot of different things, particular in esports, but also just in everyday life.
Yeah.
Ticketing for events is there's a lot of ticketing vendors that are moving to this as some way to keep these tickets immortalized in your wallet forever. Once in a while I'll find a little piece of paper that reminds me that I went to a concert in 1987.
Right.
But generally speaking, I don't find those that often.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a lot of really cool things, and I think that a lot of people get sort of, any nascent industry is going to have cash grabs and scams.
Right.
The internet had that in '99 and 2000 as well, but here we are. So, that's kind of how I think about things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
I know that I have learned a lot. I hope people watching have learned a lot as well, but I really appreciate all that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the Collegiate Sports Management Group EsportsU Coaches and Directors Summit. Very excited to be here and kick off this exciting second day of content and conversation. My name is Ray Katz. I am Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Collegiate Sports Management Group, as well as our esports division, EsportsU. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the key value drivers in traditional sports, as well as the key value drivers in esports, and go a little bit into depth about the overall media landscape some of the similarities and differences between traditional sports and esports, notably traditional college sports and college esports. And then I'm going to talk into why brands are so excited by the growth of esports in general and then collegiate esports specifically. And finally, I'm going to close a little bit about what we think we're doing in the space to make collegiate esports successful and how coaches, directors, and other key university constituents can work with us in these times of challenging enrollment, challenging admissions, and talking about how some schools have really used esports and esports content as a major driver of branding for their university and ultimately attracting very desirable STEM students as well as other students. I also teach sports media at Columbia University, along with one of my colleagues, Dan Gerard, a CSMG colleague and also associate professor. I've been teaching since 2009, and over the past 2 or 3 years, esports has definitely crept into the conversation because in many nations, particularly the ones in Asia, esports are in fact considered sports. Overall, what we've seen in the media landscape specifically is a premium on live action and live competition for any number of reasons, fantasy, gambling, etc. The ability to get news and highlights from so many different sources has increased dramatically. And most important, we've seen production costs decrease, the cost of having a studio decrease, the costs of broadcasting live events decrease. When I was at the Football Network 20 years ago, it cost at least $40,000 to do a multi-camera reasonable production of a football game. That cost is about 15 to 20% of that now. And in basketball, it's even more pronounced because on the traditional sports side, many of our clients, once they work with us, are able to actually use student talent and student equipment to get games on television, even for organizations that are as selective and particular as Sportsnet New York and others in the NBC Sports family. So as what is an acceptable television audience, besides the obvious streaming, becomes a lower and lower number, esports becomes more and more practical if it's produced properly. At CSMG, we have a studio and we have some tremendous production partners that help us do this. And we really feel we've hit upon a winning formula. So we really look at concurrent viewers as a key statistic, as well as unique viewers as another key statistic, as we measure the success of the productions that we're doing. The overall media landscape, when I think of when I was a kid, or when I was the age of most of the folks in the audience, there were a handful of channels. And then at most, there were a few dozen channels. And now, my streaming television service delivers over 2,000 channels. So with all that in mind, and with the growth of esports, with over 500 million esports fans globally, with eMarketer reporting that there are 29.6 million monthly esports viewers in 2022, which is up almost 12% from 2021. When you look at statistics like the 21 League of Legends Championship delivered 4.01 million concurrent viewers, you're starting to see extreme viability because the cost of producing 3 days of esports is a fraction of the cost of producing 3 days of traditional sports. So we believe this is an amazing opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity for investors. It's going to be an amazing opportunity for coaches and directors to build a business. So some of the similarities and differences from traditional college sports, and I'll focus on that, is the production costs are a lot lower. It would cost tens of millions of dollars to produce 6 hours of live content 5 nights a week of competition, which we are doing for a fraction of the cost. And so as we continue to learn how to build an audience, to drive traffic, to maintain that audience beyond 30 seconds or a minute into 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes or even 10 minutes, using some traditional marketing tools as well as some other marketing tools, we're incredibly excited as to what all of us in this conversation are going to be able to do to drive collegiate esports. Magnifying some of this is the fact that brands are having an increasingly difficult time reaching that ever coveted 18 to 34-year-old male and female audience. And in general, just every 18 to 34-year-old, regardless of how they identify themselves, which, by the way, is one of the things that's beautiful about esports, is that it doesn't matter what gender you are, what size you are, how athletic you were born. There's a place for you in this amazing pursuit that we call collegiate esports. And it is so exciting to me to see kids that may have not been the social epicenter in high school proudly wearing their college esports jersey and really building their own amazing peer group and building their own confidence so that they can succeed in life moving forward. But traditional sports, in many cases, move slowly, some more slowly than others. And that's not really what turns on the 18 to 34-year-old demographic, which is one of the reasons that the MMA demographic is so much younger than the boxing demographic, if you just look at two combat sports. But bringing all this back to esports, you see that there are all sorts of ways, and we've really increasingly perfected that over the past 3 years of doing this with regards to building events and producing events. As we start to have these great conversations with our esports team, when I always talk about all the things that happen in traditional sports to make broadcasts, to make streams compelling, and then just having great conversation and learning where I might be right and learning where our perspective from traditional sports may not work. It's been an awful lot of fun. Brands are really engaged. We had over a dozen sponsors for our Collegiate Esports Commissioners Cup, which we ran in Atlanta in May. And again, the other different thing about esports is we had winners from the group of five. We had winners from Division I, Division II, Division III. It's so much fun to watch Northwood, quote unquote, upset Michigan State when it's really not that much of an upset. But that definitely creates a terrific story because the program is just so strong and so well run, among many others. It's been really fun to see how quickly the esports programs have matured and developed with some of the great work being done by the coaches and the program directors out there. So brands are really jumping all over this. And as I said, we had over a dozen brands that had tremendous return on investment, and they're back for more next year. And our focus is just doing everything we can to build an audience and reach out to brands that are going to help us build an audience, as well as partners that are going to help us build an audience. It's been really rewarding at this stage of my career to make this pivot with at least some of my time. We are doing an amazing job at Collegiate Sports Management Group with our EsportsU vertical, really promoting and building scale, acquiring schools. We touch more than 500 schools. And as anyone knows that runs a network, what really made ESPN take off is the aggregation of content, and their growth not only continued through several decades, making them the worldwide leader in sports, but their growth accelerated. And we're just about at that stage now where they were right as they were acquiring major sports content in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Only the difference is the speed of everything continues to increase, and the speed of building upon the great successes that Collegiate Sports Management Group has had in traditional sports, delivering this to esports with the help of our own fantastic esports studio that you are learning about from various people at Collegiate Sports Management Group and EsportsU, headed up by our own amazing Angela Bernard-Thomas. We're really seeing that we can offer to anybody that is competing in collegiate esports. The ability to secure content, build content, curate content, and monetize content. And the next 2, 3, 5 years, the next decade is going to be incredibly exciting and incredibly fun. So with that, I want to thank everybody. I want to remind everybody that whether it's the NBA, whether it's Professional Fighters League, or whether it's esports, at every level, ultimately, at the end of the day, media is the key driver as to enterprise value. We saw NBA teams, for example. The most expensive NBA team was about $600 million when the Milwaukee Bucks sold about a decade ago. A short 3 years later, it went up from $600 million to the Los Angeles Clippers selling for $2.2 billion, all driven by media rights, all driven by the amazing job the NBA did building an audience. And that's what we're doing here. So thank you. Enjoy the content. Enjoy the conversation. And I want to kick it over to my good friend and one of the greatest esports personalities I know, Paul Santoro, better known as Paulie Hype.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ray Katz, COO at CSMG. I appreciate all that kindness. Welcome back as we are here for day number 2 of the CSMG Coaches and Directors Summit 2022, presented by EsportsU and Esports Foundry. I'm your host, Paulie Hype, and we're back again to get some of this energy up for day number 2. Before we kick it off to our first discussion group, I just want to give everyone a little rundown of what the day is going to look like here for day number 2 of the summit. So, starting it off, we're going to have strengthening esports programs. This is going to be a Maryville case study. So, the first 50 or so minutes are going to be Maryville going over their program with Dan Clerkey. It's going to be an awesome topic. Make sure to tune in for that. That's coming up next. Followed by that, we have the Commissioners Roundtable. That's going to be around 5 p.m. EST. Commissioners Roundtable with Dan Coonan of the ECAC, Carolyn Henry. We have Bob Drainoff, ECC, and Alex Kelly as well from Big Sky. Some great stuff there. Carolyn from Mountain West. And then the breakout session is going to be at 6 o'clock. The breakout sessions are going to be licensing apparel and merchandise for your program. That'll be with CSMG's Jim Connolly and Tommy Waters from Esports Gear. Optimizing live productions with CSMG's very own Kyler Tandle, production head. Selling local sponsorships with CSMG's own Kevin McIntyre. And it's going to be awesome there for some of those breakout sessions. So without further ado, I'm going to give you 15 seconds of hype before I throw it over to the Maryville case study. Kyler will be moderating that with Dan Clerkey, David Brisson, and Jensen Shang. That's going to be our first strengthening esports program session of the day. So 15 seconds of hype. Let's go. What do we got? Whatever it is, who cares? Collegiate Esports, we are here. We're getting back into the season. And without further ado, over to Maryville, one of the top esports colleges in the country. Maryville, Kyler, over to you.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back, or welcome to the CSMG/EsportsU Coaches and Directors Summit. My name is Kyler Tandle. I will be the moderator for this panel as we are doing a little bit of a case study here with one of the, if not the most successful collegiate esports program in the nation in Maryville Esports. So, gentlemen, we wanted to kind of title this one, right, Strengthening Esports Programs, right? A case study on you guys. We've gathered, obviously Dan Clerkey, some of you may have heard from him yesterday with our panel and the state of the industry, but Dan wanted to bring on some of his other, some of the people behind the scenes and some of the people maybe not even in front of the camera as well, in his head coach in legal ed. Actually, I'm not going to do the introductions for you guys. Why don't we roll through this? Who's who? What do you guys do for the program? And then, we'll go through it there.
My name is Daniel Clark, and I'm the director of Maryville Esports.
I'm Jensen Go. I'm the League of Legends head coach for Maryville Esports.
David Brisson, head of strategy and development for Maryville Esports.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining me today. I really appreciate it, having you guys here on the panel and having you guys here to talk to your experiences and your expertise. So first off, for anyone who maybe isn't familiar with Maryville, with your program, and really the continued successes that you guys have, I kind of want to ask you guys a two-part question, right? Number one, how did you guys do this year? How do you guys, usually, do in competition? And number two, kind of, how do you feel about those results, right? How are you guys feeling about what happened, or what's been happening up until today?
Jensen, you want to cover league, and then I can, because it just recently ended, and then I can cover the stuff that happened prior in the year.
Yeah, I think this year we've made a semifinals finish in the collegiate championship, and then we have been putting up results in the riot circuit as well, where we're competing with the rest of the academy, or basically the 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 tier two teams on the riot's ecosystem as a collegiate team. And there we made it to the main Proving Grounds event itself, but unfortunately we were not able to beat TSM, which is a very big brand out there. Their academy team, we weren't able to overcome them. So that's kind of the results for the League of Legends team.
And then Overwatch, we won the national championships this year, so obviously that's a success for us. But given the roster that we had this year, we sent 2 players to the San Francisco Shock in the Overwatch League as well, and they just finished second overall in the Overwatch League. So I would say that that's almost an expected result with that team. I would say overall, pretty happy with this year. Obviously, it would have been nice to get the win in CLOL, but I think that it is a positive sign for the overall industry that the competition is getting better year over year. So I like to take the positives out of it. And then as an overall team, like I like to see all the staff here at Maryville as like part of one team, one family. And so other wins like our big arena, the announcement of the big arena, working on another arena in Chesterfield here in St. Louis, our continued high school engagement. All those things are big wins in my book. So I think results on and off the field this year were pretty good. Probably one of our best years, to be honest.
Right on, absolutely. I mean, you guys have had success and all. Actually, let's just talk to that, right? Because as most of us know, right, that are in the collegiate space, right, Maryville, you guys have had a history of success dating all the way back to those initial first few CLO years, right? And over the time, right, as time has gone on, some of your competitors from back in the day, right, they've kind of fallen off a little bit, right? I mean, some of the schools that were prevalent in year one and year two, they still have programs, sure, but maybe they're not as strong, maybe they're not as competitive. So Dan, I kind of want to ask you, and maybe a little bit to David too, if we speak about program development and all of that. But what do you guys feel have been some of the pillars to your success? Right, what has allowed you guys to stay relevant throughout all the years, and to stay maybe not just relevant as a competitive program, but just in general, all the other things that you just mentioned, Dan. How have you guys been able to maintain that success throughout the last 5, 6, 7 years?
Up until actually fairly recently, I want to say that I'm one of the few people in collegiate that came from a professional background. Obviously, we have Jensen joining the fray and some other people like Special at other schools. But early on, I was really the only person that had any form of experience managing in pro. So I had a lot of endemic knowledge. I had a lot of wins under my belt. I had been an LCS owner for a time. So when it came to like the esports side of our program, that really was not hard for me. It was actually like a step down from the level that I was used to in terms of management and recruitment. I would say what's kept us potent though, with schools coming and going over the years though, has to be the fact that I had that endemic knowledge, because I think the majority of the people early on were more college admin leaning, and for me, over the last 7 years, I've just kind of strengthened my ability to be a college admin to complement my esports skill set. So it's been pretty easy because I'm covering all the angles as a director. It was only recently, I would say, right before COVID, that I actually got more staff members here at Maryville. So I've been very fortunate to be building a very talented staff around me with David and Jensen and Andrew and Jordan. And so I just think that as we level up, as we add more skill sets and threats to our management core, we're just becoming better and better. And I almost wouldn't even use the word better. I would almost like to use the word mature a little bit more, because that's something that the industry at large kind of needs to do. And I think that we've done a pretty good job as a program maturing, and we're maturing every day. That'd be my viewpoint on it. I don't know, David, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, like Dan and Jensen, I also come from the pro side, and that was kind of my introduction, having 20 plus years in sports entertainment background. And, learning and working, aside Dan, and understanding his vision for the collegiate side and the amateur side of what boundaries could be pushed. Just looking at how the university looks at, you know, um, the industry of esports versus football or basketball or whatever sport you want to compare it to. I think we have just a very cutting edge outlook on the future of esports and what it represents. And our goal was to sort of own the Midwest out of the gate, and from there it was how do we become the national brand, how do we become the Alabama or Kentucky of basketball, football, respectfully. And I think we've been able to do that. And then I think the biggest thing is our international presence. I think when we talk to brands and sponsors and things like that, I think we're internationally known, which I think for an esports program, of a school of our stature and size, I think it's a, to the point of this call, a case study of what a small university can do from a viewership and ROI and digital metrics and all those kind of buzzwords that exist in the world, but what that actually means to bottom line revenue for a university or a higher ed program. And when Dan approached me about kind of joining the Maryville vision and all that, I was a little bit reluctant with my background and going into higher ed. With that said, I think the way that Dr. Lombardi and all of our administrative look at esports, it's not like any other university. And I think that the things that we're trying to do and accomplish are second to none industry wide, just not collegiate.
Absolutely, and I think that again that's why we're here, right? This is why a lot of people are trying to figure out, how do we replicate what you guys are doing? How do we, how do they do what you guys are doing to a degree, or why are you guys doing what you're doing to a degree? But to kind of, I think, focus in then a little bit more, I want to talk about gameplay a little bit before we jump into business and all of the other stuff. Jensen, this one's for you, right? I want to talk a little bit about this because to someone like me who's traditionally a League of Legends fan and all that, I know that you've been a coach that's been all over the world. You've worked with a lot of different professional teams and different regions. My question, I really want, I think a lot of people want to know, how did you end up at Maryville, and why a North American collegiate college? What was the draw, or what brought you here? How did you get to this point?
When I first came to NA, I worked with the models, with the academy team, and I realized that there's a lot of cultural challenges that exist that's very unique to NA and esports, right? Where there's this very interesting intersection, because unlike traditional sports, in esports, players, they don't start training under a structure or a system or a coach. From a very early age, which is what happens if you want to pick up any other sport, right? Like you start going to community events or whatsoever, and then you start developing your skills and your literacy of the game from the age of 6 or 7, and you're very used to working in a team environment, a coaching environment. But in esports and for League of Legends, a lot of times players, they go through they go up, they climb the ranks in solo queue where everything is basically self-taught, and then all of a sudden they need to be placed into a team environment. And I realized that this is something that the Asian teams got right, where they had these B teams. They have the B houses in Korea and Taiwan. You would spend almost close to a year just being a understudy or training partner for the team before you even join an academy team in the first place. And in China, they have like these massive B team systems with like lots of players in them. The moment you hit a certain rank on the ladder, they fly you in. You are then boot camping for a month there at the facility, and depending on how well you do, they then decide whether to retain you on as a training partner or as a trainee in whatever capacity, given how well you perform in those scenarios. So the West was very lacking in all of this, and culturally to do the same things and try to replicate the B house environment or what they do in China or Taiwan would not be possible to do. But the West has a very successful model of developing sports and talent, especially in America, and that is in the collegiate space. So I looked at this, I saw the resources that was available, and when then when Clerky pitched his vision to me, it's like, yeah, this is what I think should be the future for development in the NA ecosystem for esports.
Oh, right on. And I think, well, maybe let's follow up on that a little bit then. Because Dan, okay, so Dan, you pick up Jensen, you've got this going. I think that's going to be my question then is, or to any other schools that want to be competitive like you guys on that level, is this something that we should be expecting to see in the future, right? Is this now, the standard that you guys, Jensen, you and Dan, do you guys feel that this, if every college across the nation starts doing this, if they start recruiting coaches like Jensen and trying to build this atmosphere. Is this going to be the next standard, or is this something that's very successful that obviously it's proven to work, but is it sustainable? Is it possible for everyone, or maybe not everyone, but right, the greater sense of the industry and the ecosystem? How do you guys feel about that?
It's a dream of mine, obviously, to get to a point in the future where every university has an esports team that's taken seriously, and every day they report to practice. It's an improvement-driven mindset across the whole program. Um, I think for me though, like the reason isn't necessarily like to see like a March Madness with millions of dollars flowing through it. For me, it's a little bit more simpler than that. The reason why this is my vision is just because uh, it's best for player development and just players in general. What we see in tier two ecosystems almost across the industry, that's like below academy, I would say, like right before you, I would consider academy professional, because you're making a higher salary than exists in a lot of semi-pro sports actually. But in the tier two ecosystem, you kind of go from like your parents' bedroom making no money on a Discord server with a coach that hasn't been certified by any national body, to playing academy, and that's horrifying to me. So while I don't see collegiate as being, or maybe it does end up being this way, but it doesn't have to be the definitive path to pro. I want it to at least be an option, like a parallel option, similar to how you can go through the Canadian hockey system, where you can choose to spend a couple extra years developing and maturing physically and emotionally in the NCAA model before you go to the show in the NHL. I'd like to see that reality in esports. This isn't something where there's a century of history to the competition. So it's a very powerful tool, especially when you're trying to convince your parents that this is a worthwhile pursuit, that you can get a college degree. And it's one of those things where, at least in America, with how expensive college is, getting scholarships after your first, after your 18 to 20-year-old years is usually harder academically. You usually get the majority of your scholarships going into school when you're an 18-year-old freshman, and the way that the current path to pro is set up, a lot of players are foregoing that span of time to try to go pro for no pay. And so for me, it's more about like a health of a pipeline, health of the ecosystem, health of kind of the player experience of pursuing this. And that's the big thing for me. And obvious it's a dream. I want Maryville to serve as like a case study and a model for that. We want to show results. We want to eventually be competing to win proving grounds, to show that this can be a functional alternative to the traditional tier two within esports, and that's what we strive for every year.
And I can add to that a little bit, just from a business perspective. I think, we're very fortunate to have Jensen and Dan here at Maryville, but I think if you're a university looking at, just adding a coach, maybe not to the magnitude of Jensen, but I think you have to look at the metrics. I think if you look at what the ROI and the business case of adding relevant esports within your university, what that means to your student life and all those different things, all those things that they try to check boxes within higher ed. I think having a relevant esports program or a relevant system within esports, every university should be looking at it, because their baseball players and their basketball players and football players are all playing gaming. And a lot of these esports, figureheads and coaches, etc., are the relevant people in digital media. And it helps the school with a brand perspective. And I think just having any sort of relevant and adding bodies within the esports ecosystem at universities, you have 2 or 3 basketball coaches, you have 2 or 3 soccer coaches, both on male and female. I think having relevancy within esports, it has probably a 15 to 25x, return versus like traditional sports. And I can say that with my background and everything like that, and just knowing how we look at it. But at the same time, if you're not looking at esports as a relevant, not even revenue stream, but relevant digital eyeball within your sports and student life perspective, I think you are sort of behind the times.
Oh, absolutely. I think that does kind of maybe something to speak to, and then maybe I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on this then, of just in that sense, as we talk about biz dev and as we talk about player experience, right? It sounds like they are kind of a little bit married to each other, right? In the sense of as you grow as a business, as you grow as a program, and you're able to provide more resources to your to your students, that then kind of maybe gives them a little bit more, or it gives more value to your players, right? And I think maybe then this is more a question maybe for David and Jensen, kind of marrying the two. Do you guys work to do anything like that? What are you guys doing to maybe better the experience for your players, not just as practicing and getting better competitively, but is there anything you guys are doing that for anybody that comes to Maryville, what is that experience like from them top to bottom in terms of showing up on campus and all of that, all the way to how you guys practice, how you guys scrim, how you guys develop your students?
Well, I can't speak for the other teams within the program, but this is my vision and this is what I aspire to push towards, right? We had a few key guiding principles, of which one of them was the concept of balance. That this was something where, as a athlete or student athlete under the program, the student portion of it is equally important as well. And it's not just about, like, when you first frame the question, it's about why did I move into this? It's not just about getting access to the resources and stuff like that. It's also a lot about being able to service the students and being able to push for what I think has been something that's been like what David mentioned, something that we have been very far behind in terms of finding this unique synergy between academics and esports, very particularly, or mental sports as a whole. Because I think that there's a very strong overlap, especially within esports and STEM fields, where this is a very iterative kind of problem solving process that players go through. Players don't so happen to luck into making top 200 on the ladder. They don't happen to wake up and randomly become challenger. The hours they spent in is they're crafting lots of soft skills, lots of problem solving, lots of developmental, lots of decision making skills that they exercise on a daily basis within the games. And if they're able to translate these things over into project management capacities in terms of design and innovation, these are things that they can carry forward into the STEM fields as well. So I'm very actively encouraging my players to go out there and do degrees that will be able to allow them to assess these skill sets, to do computer science, to be able to move into these fields where they will be able to take these soft skills that they have learned, access them, and then translate them over into the real world itself. So we talked about academics, we talked about social life. Like, this is one of the things that I'm encouraging my players to go out there and make friends and have a healthy social life here as well, because that's a very big part of what the campus experience is meant to be, rather than simply just staying in their rooms and playing games, trying to grind for number one all day. And that's me having the luxury of having come from pro as well, to be able to say that this is my experience in pro. This is the diminishing returns that past a certain point of time as well. You're not going to get the most efficient use of your practice just grinding the game over and over again. So there's these things that can help you out as well. And I think that there's quite a fair bit of studies that shows that being able to engage in these other areas does help reset players' ability to learn and pick up and develop new concepts at the same time too.
For me, like, this is gonna sound kind of stupid, but if you think about it, majority of esports players don't go through. There's no like youth infrastructure. So when I grew up playing hockey, I played for the Chesterfield Falcons when I was a young kid, and I had a birth year that I played with all the way up through high school. That doesn't exist in any form in esports. So during my time in pro, I worked with hundreds of players in several games, and a lot of those players were very socially underdeveloped. When it came to the initial response to conflict was to get away from it as fast as possible, usually. So for me, the student experience in the Maryville Esports program, it's going to sound kind of stupid, but if you really think about it, there really is no youth infrastructure in esports. When I grew up playing hockey, I played for the Chesterfield Falcons with my birth year from a very young age all the way up through high school. It doesn't exist in any capacity. David can't take his son to esports camp or esports practice with kids his age. So throughout my years working in pro, I worked with hundreds of players across several titles, and I noticed it was extremely common that my players were very socially underdeveloped. Whenever there would be inter-team conflict, the response wasn't to resolve it; it was to run away from it. So it's very important to our program. You'll see a lot of programs allow players to be online and remote. We don't allow that. So if you're going to play on the Maryville esports team, if you're going to get a scholarship to be on our starting roster, you're expected to be in person, so we can work on on these things that might not be innate from years of youth sports. Obviously, we have a lot of players within our program that played youth sports, some even at a very high level. But we also have the opposite, where we have players that didn't really have any formal sports training growing up. So being in person, working on being able to see your teammates in the eyes, being able to resolve conflict in a day-to-day practice environment is super, super important. That's probably the main thing that I see as a plus to our program. I very often see players come in year one, and then when they leave after their first 2 semesters, they're almost an unrecognizable person to when they came in. And I see that as a huge positive. So while that might sound pretty low-hanging fruit and almost cliche as an answer, it's really not, because if you really think about the history of where esports is at. So bringing the players in for team workouts, uh, uh, really trying to get them to go out as a team building activities, all kinds of stuff. Jensen puts together trivia nights. Our team really has a family atmosphere. They hang out outside of practice all the time. This isn't we obviously have some players that prefer to go hang out with their online friends in their rooms, but the vast majority of our players, they spend time outside of practice, and they're developing the social maturity that'll carry them not just potentially into professional, but into their careers for the rest of their lives.
No.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add into that, because I think, the way that we treat our student athletes in esports is just such I call it a buzzword, and we actually, at least I refer to them within like our athletic department and stuff like that, as digital athletes. We're playing digital sports, and I think if a school looks at things and looks at these athletes as digital athletes, I think the work that has to be done to play some of these games, and I'd say that the countless hours of a quarterback's work is the same amount as a League of Legends player or an Overwatch player, and I don't think that's widely recognized. But when students come into our university, they get the same Under Armour package that our student athletes do, and we try to treat them exactly the same way as we treat any other prestige player or athlete coming into the school. And I think that's just another way to look at it. But the term esports, is my son Dan referred to, there is no structure in esports, and that's a publisher problem. But I would say, as at the academic, higher ed level, if you look at these guys as digital athletes and these are digital sports and it's the new age, etc., I think it's something that, again, it refers back to people can get their head around a digital athlete versus a regular athlete. So again, it's just another perspective of how we look at things, but we treat our digital athletes as regular athletes, and they get the same swag and all that same stuff. So again, that all comes around morale, and they're walking around the school just like the football team and basketball team, baseball team. Maryville doesn't have a football team, so I'll retract football, but they chose esports over football, so go us. But
that's another thing I wanted to say, is just that, like, with the arena and the other stuff that we're working on for the next 3-4 years, we're really trying to build culture into our walls. So having it really baked in, like you would see if you walked into a Division I football training facility, having history on the walls, players that we've sent to the LCS, pictures of them in the LCS, pictures of them in the Overwatch League, our trophies. We really want to have people create a sense of pride when people simply walk into the doors as a player. So we're really trying to build overlap with traditional sports. I think actually recently, I'm not going to name the person, but we recently hosted someone from the LCS in our building, and when they walked through, they said that we have a better setup than some of the professional teams. So that's something that we take pride in, and that's something that we're doubling down on, and we really want to continue to build that.
No, absolutely. I mean, well, let's talk about that a little bit then, in terms of building, what you guys are building, not just with the players, but physically, and right, as as a college with the program, maybe this is a question for David, but maybe Dan, I know you'll be able to speak to this, but talk to me about what does that look like behind the scenes, right? The infrastructure that you guys are putting in, I think everyone can understand, right? When you look at the panel right here, everyone knows, okay, they see Jensen, they know what he does, right? They know he's the League of Legends coach, they know what that means and all that. But talk to me then a little bit, David, as to how you guys are building this business development, right? Biz dev, this infrastructure behind it, so that you guys can have a facility like that, so that you guys can have the Under Armour package like you mentioned for your students and all of that. Where does that come? Where does that all come from? How are you guys building that and putting that together?
Well, I'll let Dan kind of jump in after my thoughts, but I think, we're looking at a 16,000 square foot facility to open here in the next 6 to 8 months. It'll be state of the art, it'll be public facing, and a lot of that vision has to do with Dan and Jensen's, outlook on the amateur side and, building that infrastructure that doesn't exist. The publishers don't want to do it, so someone has to take the reins, and we're fortunate here at Maryville that we have a president that sees that vision and sees that, and we have the corporate support locally. Before I started at Maryville, I didn't know there was that many Fortune 500 companies out of St. Louis, and if you Google it, it'll actually blow your mind. The amount of big name American companies, and just not Anheuser-Busch. There's 15 to 25 major corporations that are headquartered, in the greater St. Louis area. So to have that corporate support in junction with, the president's vision and all that stuff all helps. With that said, I think the way that we look at, the vision and the future and all those different things, we just want to be ahead of the curve. And I think this is a way to use something that's maybe not recognized in certain higher ed circles. And I think we will become that hub. Now, publishers have a lot to say about that, but we very much believe that the work that Dan's doing behind the scenes and all the work to basically build that structure in amateur, it needs to exist, because I have 3 young kids. I look at how do I sign my kid up for esports or digital sports, and that just doesn't exist. It's not like I can go down to the park and sign them up for this, and to put them up on a Discord or put them in, that can all work. But I'm fortunate to have someone like Dan that I can be like, hey, how do I do this? Or Jensen, had the resources around me, to be able to essentially, figure out the way to put my kids into different sports and esports. But at the same time, the things that Dan's trying to put for real structure has to be done across the industry. So when push comes to shove, the way that we're looking at both our small facility and our large facility, again, it's an industry standard that we're trying to set just on a collegiate or amateur. And I think the larger facility, it's still going through the approval processes, but at the same time, your listeners can Google it. It's state of the art. It will rival anything else that's happening in the pro scene. I'd put, Overactive Media in Toronto is building something kind of similar, but obviously they have a different revenue stream with Live Nation and a different, kind of outlook on things from a revenue perspective. We have obviously our baseball or our basketball, volleyball, wrestling programs that will be, sort of housed. It will be more digital focused and esports focused. But again, all these things, someone had to make a big move, and that's Maryville making that big move to kind of shake up the industry a little bit. No one's looking at ROI. Players on the pro side think that they all deserve to be paid, which is just ridiculous. I've worked in pro sports and around pro sports forever. The salaries and the conversations of what the relevancy of what these players think that they need just is outrageous. There's no other real way to put it, and that's not me insulting the industry. You have to look at a 10x to a 20x. That's how pro sports will look at things. And on the esports side, it's the opposite. They're losing 20x on a player because they want to stay relevant and cool in the industry, or they want to flex in a different way online. And it's just it's a different way to look at things. But what you have to do as like Maryville, or how we would look at things as Maryville, is, what is the relevancy of us winning? What is the relevancy of us doing these things? What is the relevancy of, what that does to drive revenue in a different manner, which would be obviously, signing kids up for school, and all the other auxiliary things just complement it. Like, we want to be, a net zero. We obviously want to make money, but we want to be net zero on our investments. And our full outlook is, if we're relevant in esports, we're going to attract 50 to 100 kids from all over the world to come to Maryville, which they're paying XYZ tuition. And, if we can add a Raymond James or Wells Fargo or Enterprise or whatever brand, Under Armour, into the mix and have them pay for some of the things that we're trying to do, I think that helps. And I think some of these schools, they all have athletic departments, they all do traditional fundraising, And you can do that with esports, and doesn't mean you have to go build, $100 million plus facility or, whatever you have to do. You just have to have relevancy and start organically, because that's what Dan did. Dan was given an opportunity to essentially go out and build his vision. And here we sit 5 years later, and, the fruits of his labor and his patience and his consistency year after year has gotten us to this point. So my kind of takeaway from a business development, and I'll stop rambling on here as I have 3 kids basically waving at me, is, you have to start organically, and you have to sort of build those trust factors. You have to have sort of KPIs that you achieve year after year. And I think if you do that organically, there has to be a small investment put in from someone within the school. But at the same time, you have to be trustworthy. You have to be a good steward of capital, and you can grow. And throwing money at, if you're a big school and you just want to throw $200 million at an esports facility and team and all that stuff, and we've heard some of those things, and some of those schools have talked about that, and that's what the CAA, IMG, vision is. Just throw a bunch of money at it. It will not work. Okay, so when push comes to shove, and you may have to edit that out because I have daughters that don't want to listen.
You're good. You're good.
What I was trying to say is, throwing money at this, you have to build your esports program organically through, your students, and, you have to build it within the community, because we've seen that on the pro side. Just coming in and throwing money in esports just doesn't work. You have to have relevancy within the community. And I think what Dan's been able to do, and bringing people like Jensen, you mentioned earlier that you're a fan, and, I didn't know much about Jensen's background, but at the same time, you look at what he's accomplished, you echo that with Dan, and that can all be done organically, within a university with someone with a vision and a little bit of trust. And it may not come from athletics right away, because you're asking them to do something that essentially is outside of their realm, right? They understand, field is 7:00 and players show up at 5:00, and you're asking, in most cases, and I'm not suggesting that all ADs are like this, but they have 20, 30 years of experience of putting people on the field, right? And esports is completely different because it's behind the scenes a lot of the time. So with all that said, I'll let Dan kind of finish, and I apologize for our listeners for Bo and George or Briston not behaving.
So a lot of people might not know this about Maryville, but we've been one of the top 5 fastest growing private institutions in North America for the last 6 years, or might even be 7 years now. Yeah. We've recorded record enrollment for 17 years. So regardless of how esports is doing on campus, like, our school is fine, even if we didn't have esports. Like, we're performing well in an era where higher education in general has come into question several times from several different fields and industries. And so when we talk about how well Maryville's doing, we still pale in comparison to the size of like a UT Austin or an Ohio State. So our university knows this, and that's why we're getting ahead. That's why our university is willing to get ahead, because they know that one day when all these schools do get involved, that have massive endowments, massive alumni pools, like, the advantage that we're going to have is our history, right? And so to have a seat at the table at the end of the day in the finished project of collegiate esports, we have to make these pushes. So that's why we're willing to bring people like Jensen on board. That's why we're bringing David on board to focus on the BD stuff. That's why we're talking about a 9-figure arena on our campus, and we're building a smaller arena to build out the products that we will then place into that arena, because we know that we have to create that gap. And so when we're talking about infrastructure, with what Maryville wants to be within esports in the end product, we have to make those moves now. And so that's why you see us going out there and planting a flag and being like, we're going to build a 3,000 seat arena with a ton of space attached to it for community and varsity. I would say that's also the reason why, like, if you look at our backyard, we have SLU, we have WashU, which is an internationally renowned school. And so, like, even in our backyard, there are risks at the end of the day when we're talking about some of these schools' budgets compared to Maryville's, even though Maryville's one of the fastest growing universities in North America. And so we're focused on the high school development and all this other stuff. So like our goal is to have a seat at that table competitively at the end of the day when divisions eventually are formed and the large universities get involved. But also we want to be the destination in the Midwest where students go at any age, middle school, high school, to be on a stage in front of their parents, and where their parents see their students or their kids' hobbies first contextualized for them. A lot of times when you're explaining esports to someone,
I'm jumping in. Not the Midwest. The United States and the planet.
okay.
We already own the Midwest, baby.
I'm trying to be humble on this call, but I'm trying to be as humble as possible on this call because it's something that's usually lost on me. But yeah, I mean, he is right. Like we want to be a destination, at the very least, in the Midwest in our local area where students go at all levels to compete and be on a stage. So when we're talking about a 3,000 seat arena, I understand that Maryville versus SLU isn't going to fill that arena for another decade or more, maybe. But I know that, like, if we put the time in and we build out high school in our local area, most stuff here in Missouri now has 3,300 students competing, and we're looking at getting to the point where there's over 100 schools involved in that at the high school level. I don't think it's unrealistic for us to fill that for high schools. So that's ultimately what we want to do is we want to carve out a permanent footprint in the scholastic ecosystem in whatever form esports takes, similar to like an independent in traditional sports like Notre Dame, but at the same time we want to be that hub for youth and summer camps and all that stuff. So yeah.
No, I think that's awesome. And I think to me then, you mentioned there at the end the importance of seeing somebody on a stage, right? Seeing kids on a stage. I know, Dan, you've brought this up previously, but I think I want to hear from the group of you, all of you guys, in terms of the importance of then live events, right? You guys are building this arena, you guys are doing all these things, right? You guys have the players, you guys are you're growing your college, but talk to me then about and this can be across all the departments here, right? For the player experience, for the business development. How important then are live events to you guys and Maryville's vision of this, as you guys are building this arena, but also I think just in general for collegiate sports as a whole across the board, what does that do for all these different factors of it? Having a live event, having in-person competitions, right? I know we're getting out of COVID and all of that where we haven't had them in a while, and maybe it's newer to some people comparatively, but. And it costs money, yes, but is that important? Should that be a focus? Is that something that attributes partially to the success? How important are live events?
I think that live events are paramount to the future of Maryville esports and just youth and scholastic esports in general. I think that the lower age you go, the more important live events are. I see a lot of companies out there trying to build unicorn online platform companies where they're just trying to get as many users as possible. That really doesn't solve the problem of teaching kids the same things that they learn in traditional sports: the face-to-face conflict resolution, the sportsmanship, seeing your opponents physically, and creating friends that last forever. Obviously, like, I think it would be ignorant to say that doesn't happen online, because I'm a gamer. I've been a gamer all my life, and I have friends that I've met online that I will be friends with for the rest of my life. But it's just not the same, especially like in your formative years as a kid. And so, for me, live events are vital to the future of esports. I don't think that this is something that should become like wholly online. I think that COVID became an excuse for a lot of groups to slash their live events, and I find that to be very sad, to be honest. I think that this is something that needs to be focused on and needs to be a primary, and it's not something where like a live event is hard to profit off of. I mean, look at Gateway Legends. We're only in our second year. The event's growing strong, and we've built an account through that event with our sponsors and our partners locally, where this is something that's going to continue to grow year over year. So, live events are I would say my biggest focus for this and for our facilities. And there's somewhere else I was going to go with that, but I'll let David speak to that if he wants to, and then maybe I'll circle back around.
I think it qualifies. I think live events qualify the experiential side for sponsors and parents and people that may come from a traditional thinking or, my kid. And I think Fortnite, and we always come back to Fortnite, but the World Cup, I think, put relevancy, and Jensen's like hiding underneath his chair as I say Fortnite. But I think, what that did for families, with young kids that were gaming, was, wow, there's actually money in esports. Wow, there's actually structure to this. Wow, I don't have to play in the US Open to go to Arthur Ashe Stadium. I think it became relevant for a lot of families and what was really happening behind the scenes and happening organically the last 10 years. But I think the relevancy of live events, it really, sponsors come out and they see the passion that these, fans have or kids have for gaming in general. And I just think, again, we wouldn't be building the 2 facilities that we did if we weren't. But at the same time, listen, the publishers got lazy. They saw it, a way to do things online. I think the event organizers looked at the costs, and COVID kind of made people reset. But I think if you look at what's happening at the NFL level and the NHL level, it's all about experiential. And a lot of that came from the grassroots of what Riot did in the early days with, bringing communities together prior to the event starting and, hosting 1 or 2 day long kind of events and having that experiential marketing, tick. And digital eyeballs are relevant, but you have to get them, on site. And I think, again, all of that relevancy, and this doesn't need to be a big production like Arthur Ashe Stadium. This could be 500 to 1,000 people, at a small university, just getting together and pulling people from 50 miles away and having the local car dealership be involved. I know that sounds really small and basic, but I think, again, it's something that can start organically, and you can grow it from the car dealership to the regional bank to the regional sponsor to the national sponsor. And we've skipped over a few steps here, but at the end of the day, the relevancy of bringing this community, this very passionate gaming community of esports, together, it's second to none. And listen, Dan can attest this, and I'm on record. I didn't know what gaming was 6 years ago, or esports. I was fortunate enough that Jamal Murray, NBA superstar, huge gamer, said we should get involved somehow in esports. And fast forward a couple pro successes and all that stuff that I got involved with. I did not know the magnitude of the industry, and hitching my horse to Dan and Jensen is, again, these guys are the experts, just not the collegiate level, but across the industry, they're well known and all that stuff. And events are just, it's the next wave. And there are some kind of leaders, including Maryville, that are trying to do things. And I think there's some groups in Texas that are trying to do some good things and all that. So at the end of the day, to answer your question again, and me rambling on, the relevancy of events, it's just a small way to kind of create another path to revenue for that esports program or that athletic department or that university. So
there's something I want to supplement with David. So I flew the St. Louis Sports Commission out to the CLAW finals in 2019 that we won. And when I did that, we also went in and tried to get across the desk of the head of the production for the LCS. And we somehow convinced them over like months of meetings after that to have this was like 2018, to have the 2019 spring finals here in St. Louis at Chaifetz Arena. And when my president and other university presidents physically went to go see that event and see TSM, and I think it was Team Liquid on that stage with all the fans, that was the moment where they were like, oh, wow, okay, I finally get it. And I think that is the moment for most people that are non-endemic to the space. You can give them the numbers, you can give them the Twitch streams, but at the end of the day, until you put the administration in front of it physically and seeing it and putting it wholly into perspective, that's the light bulb moment. And so that's why I think that it's paramount for us just as an industry to continue to build live events. And I'll speak to the player experience as well. When you play your seasons online, like if you when you report to the lab every day and you're playing everything online for practice, and then your matches are also on practice for the entire year, it all just starts to kind of blend together, and the meaning of matches starts to get lost. And so for the player experience, like whenever I talk to players about like what their favorite times were at Maryville, every single time they tell me it was a LAN event that we went to. They never say that it was an online tournament that we won. They never say that it was something that was virtual. It's always the live LAN event where they meet their competitors and they go to the event. And at the end of the event, they're physically holding a trophy on a stage in front of people. And then that trophy comes back to the lab, and every time someone walks by it, all the memories of that live event are contained within that trophy. That is the spirit that we lose when this becomes virtual, and that's why I think that it's super important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, well, with that, I think I just want to have maybe a last quick round of questions. Thank you guys again for all of your time, and really appreciate you guys sitting down and talking with me, and sharing, sharing some of this information, sharing some of this insight into, how and why you guys do some of the things you do. But as just a quick round of it, then, if you guys had to kind of give out a single phrase, single sentiment, single thought as to why you guys are successful, right? Why is Maryville successful? What is this? What is the secret, right? Or maybe it's not even a secret, right? And it's just something that you guys have been saying all the time, but people just need to hear it again, right? What is that thing that is making you guys so successful?
I'll focus on. Never mind, my mic isn't working.
Oh no, Jensen, it's working. Hey,
It is working. If you can pick me up, right?
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be a focus on the player development rather than. So it's about putting people first rather than profits first.
I would agree with that. And I would also say that we never really settle. I think at the end of the year, whenever I meet with the president and we sit down and we reflect on the year and we do our postmortems with the teams, we're always thinking about, like, even if we have a perfect year, how do we improve? How do we improve either the player experience? How do we improve our training? How do we improve our facilities? How do we improve the club? Every year we're sitting down and we're thinking, like, how can we improve on the previous year? We never are happy with what we have or where we're at, and we're always pushing ourselves to be better. And when we're internally satisfied, we're looking externally and we're looking at, okay, so how can we help the volunteer high schoolers that aren't on the same stipend as the football coach, that are simply staying after school every day because they want to provide for a passion of their students? Like, how do we help them feel more esports literate and give back to their students, right? So that, I would say that's the biggest thing is that we're never satisfied. Do you have any comment on that, David?
Multitasking, but yes. I have a facility call going on my phone. Pushing the boundaries at the end of the day. I think it comes down to, not being happy being mediocre. I think constantly trying to innovate and constantly try to, like, bring the best and do the best and stay relevant within. And I know for a lot of your listeners, this may sound like, completely different than what they're hearing from their departments and what they're hearing within their schools. But at the same time, I think it's extremely relevant to continue to innovate both small and big. And we're fortunate at Maryville to have, a passionate leader that understands, the vision and understands what this could mean in 5 or 10 years. But I think always innovating, both small and large, would be kind of my takeaway. And Maryville is going to continue to do so, and make sure that we are seen, in the industry, or seen in the industry as, that leader. And that's something that we take pride in, and something that is very attractive to me, with working with Dan, because he's constantly looking for that, next phase, that next opportunity. And for the first time in my life, I'm kind of behind the scenes, but it's actually been a real blessing. But I think innovation and being innovative is kind of the buzzword or takeaway that, I think my word would be.
Oh, right on. Well, once again, thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Really appreciate you guys sitting down and chatting with me about your program. And I'm sure there's so many more questions that people would have for you guys. And I know I had a few more that I want to ask you guys, but we want to be mindful of everyone's time here. But thank you very much. Appreciate all of you. And with that said, if you're watching this live on the broadcast, I believe we're going back to Paulie next. But if you're watching this anywhere else, thank you for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Thank you so much, Kyler. And thank you to Maryville for that amazing case study. Dan Clerkey, David Brisson, as well as Jensen Shang. That was truly a remarkable information. And like Dan was saying, Maryville, one of the top built, structured esports programs and prestigious esports programs in the country. It was amazing to hear from them and a little bit of insight. I hope that provided a key and valuable knowledge to everybody in the chat looking to learn more about college esports. However, coming up next, we have a featured segment here called the Commissioners Roundtable. That will be moderated by Dan Coonan of the ECAC Esports Conference, Carolyn Henry from Mountain West, Bob Drainoff from ECC, and Alex Kelly from Big Sky. So without further ado, we have the second segment here for the Collegiate SMG discussion here, Commissioners Roundtable. Coming up next, right now, over to Dan Coonan with the Commissioners Roundtable at the Collegiate SMG Directors and Coaches Summit 2022.
Okay, welcome to the Commissioners Roundtable. This is part of the EsportsU Coaches and Directors Summit. My name is Dan Coonan. I'm commissioner of the ECAC, and I have three other commissioners with me. And we're gonna kick this off just by asking each of them just briefly introduce themselves and a little bit about their conference or themselves. And Carolyn Henry, you want to start out?
Sure, and thanks, and I'm happy to be on the panel with all of you guys. My name is Carolyn Henry. I'm the Senior Associate Commissioner at the Mountain West Conference, and I oversee our esports program. We have 12 football playing schools, and we have 12 esport playing schools, and we play a variety of games. We are in I believe it's year number 5 of our program, and we're hoping to continue to enhance it. So again, thank you for the opportunity.
I appreciate you joining us. Alex, why don't you go?
Yeah, Dan, thanks again for having us on. I'm Alex Kelly. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Championships and Finance at the Big Sky Conference. We are also around year 5 of having the esports initiative in our conference. We've been looking to build out the titles that we've been playing and continuing to, the conference has been continuing to explore different ways that we can get our schools involved. We have 10 schools that are under the Big Sky umbrella.
Awesome. And Bob, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Bob Dranoff, Commissioner, East Coast Conference. We are a NCAA Division II conference. Most of our schools are based in New York. We're a traditional Division II conference, and we started esports about 4 years ago. We have 14 schools that play with us, most as associate members. And like Alex and Carolyn, we're excited about expanding as we move along.
Great. And again, I'm Dan Coonan with the ECAC. It's an 85-year-old organization. Used to be Northeast only for all sorts of traditional sports, well over 200 schools. 5 years ago, we jumped into esports, and we pretty quickly went nationally with that. And now we're running 14 games, and we have we have about 150. We think schools coming on with us for this coming year, and about 1,000 teams participating. So it's rolling. Let's start with what prompted you guys to get into esports in the first place. What was the primary motivation? And it sounds like it was all roughly about the same time as us 5 years ago.
Sure, I'll jump in. Ours actually came from the top. It came from our Mountain West Board of Directors. And one of our schools, Boise State, already had an existing program, and another school, UNLV, also had an existing program. And our Board of Directors asked our staff to explore esports across the conference. And we started that with 2 schools, and 2 grew to 10 and 10 grew to 12. But I think the unique part about it is that it came from the top. And when you get support from the presidential level, that makes it a lot easier for you to administer.
Right. How about you got Bob and Alex?
Well, I'll mention, it's funny because we kind of came in a different direction. We had schools that had begun programs on campuses and were looking for some sort of way to drive opportunities for themselves, along with the vast number of other groups that offer championships, they thought that maybe that idea of having a traditional type conference activity sport like esports. And it was interesting as we started working with those schools, all of a sudden other schools joined and were interested in that kind of arrangement. So we came in the exact opposite. I'm not positive our presidents always understand exactly what we're doing with them with esports. So, but it's been valuable for the school, so it continues to grow.
Uh-huh. How about you, Alex?
Yeah, at the Big Sky, it was really a focus of our commissioner, Tom Wistersill, when he took over. Tom came in with a lot of ideas, and Tom's been very passionate about moving a lot of things forward for the Big Sky. And esports was one of those things that when he took over, I don't know if I was just the nerdiest looking one in the room of why he wanted me to be in charge or whatever that may have been, but he really took this to the presidents and said, hey, this is happening on your campus already, whether you know it or not. We want to be here to help and provide opportunities for you. So that's where it began for us.
Uh-huh. And with us, I took this job 6 years ago and was looking around and just trying anything, new ways to provide value. And some of our presidents suggested that just with the way we have been involved in championships for so long, so many decades, we might be potentially a good organizational home for esports for a lot of these programs. And so I didn't know a whole lot about esports at that time, but I sent an email to all 200 plus of our athletic directors and said, hey, if we jumped into esports, who'd be interested? And within a couple of days, I had 24 responses saying we're in. And so we jumped in, and it started with about 12 schools and a couple of games, and that grew exponentially and is still growing. And so and we get it both from the top down. We get schools that come to us because their president said, let's do this, and we know other schools that are associated with you. We also get it from really a group of students on a campus who is organizing and saying, and we want to run with this, and can we join you? And we always say, for us, you've got to be associated with the school and embraced by the school and have a full-time administrator owning it. But we've gotten it from both sides, and it's been great. It's been great. Let me ask you this. So when you took it, what was your vision, 5 years ago, and compare that to the what has happened? And is it close or does it matter? How's it going?
Yeah, so ours was exploratory in nature initially, but I think one of the things that we wanted to do was to introduce esports to conventional sport fans and introduce esport fans to conventional sports. So our very first competition was in conjunction with our men's and women's basketball championship in Las Vegas. And that, and it was integrated within the championship to the extent that we would have on our jumbo board at the basketball championship shots of games being played so that folks knew that was going on in the arena. The other goal was to incorporate as many Mountain West teams as possible. I didn't realize after having done our exhibition, it was what we really did the first year, that we jumped from 2 teams to 10 teams in a year, but that's what we did. And now moving forward, our goal is really, just like with any of our championships, is to make it as successful as possible. And I think, Dan, you hit on something, and all of us are at conferences, and we all have experience in conducting championships. This is just a different championship, just like you do baseball and basketball. They all have their, intricacies. The same with esports. And so I think all of us are really good at running championships, and that's why maybe it's a natural fit for us.
Right.
That's a great point. I that's the one thing we always say in the conference is that's what our expertise is in putting these events and championship type things together and being able to offer it. And, you ask how's it going? I wish I could say that, I understood more and I knew more about this whole area than I did 4 or 5 years ago, because I'm learning I keep trying to learn. I really thought, the first game we offered in our first year, we only offered one game, and it was League of Legends, and it was a really good event and very exciting. And then I just assumed it would be like that, forever. We would do one game, and like we do, like baseball. We have one baseball league in our conference. But I think for us is really trying to learn and keep up and be able to change. Similar to like what you were saying before, Dan, is how expansive your offerings are, and we've grown. Went from League of Legends, now we have 6 different games, but it's still, to me at least, this whole area is for somebody that's been in college athletics for 40 years, trying to understand how different this whole in some ways it's you decide you want a championship, you go ahead and do your championship, and that's that's oftentimes hard for us. And we really thought we would just all our schools would jump in, and several of them have still stayed out, thinking that's not of interest. But I'll tell you, the last thing I'll just say is, for schools like ours, which are mostly small private schools, enrollment is key. And so whatever can help with enrollment and retention, we're going to follow that lead and try to help our schools. And so we're in this thing, and we're going to keep growing it as much as we can.
Right, and I think we're going to get back to a couple of those points you just made as well, like enrollment. But Alex, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely exploratory when we first started out as well. Kind of similar to what I've heard. We started out with one game, and we've expanded last year. But we're under the middle of a strategic plan right now at the conference office as a whole, and esports is a part of that strategic plan. So, we're kind of waiting to see. This is very expansive strategic plan that has different layers, different pillars to it. It's also being ran and approved by our president. So, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that strategic plan of where they see esports. Because as you said, we've struggled a little bit with getting all of our institutions involved. I'm hoping that once the strategic plan gets put in place, that we'll be able to really go to all of our schools and say, hey, this is what the conference wants to do with esports. We need to have every school involved. So one of those things that I really want to move towards is an in-person championship. I know that's what our schools have asked for. It's what they want. So, we're exploring those ideas and how we can pull that off.
Mm-hmm. For us, we didn't necessarily have a specific vision, and we knew enough to know we wanted to jump in, and we wanted to and provide that value to our schools that needed it. And some people say, "Oh, this could be something special," or maybe this is going to be a flop or whatever. We just wanted to kind of go all in, bell to beast, and see where it took us. And we didn't. You can believe the hype about what esports is going to be and all that, and oh my God, it's going to be sponsorships and it's going to be broadcasting rights and all these things. And to some degree, some of that is true. To some degree, maybe it's overblown. But we just wanted to see. Just jump in and see, and it's been going great. And I think part of the key is that we don't have these preconceived notions, and we're willing to listen to our membership and read the room, read college athletics and how it's connected and how it's not, and take what we have expertise in championships, but also throw out some of the other stuff. I remember when we first started, there were some conferences were applying their amateurism rules to all of their esports competitors, and I think we knew enough to know that no, that's not going to work in an esports culture. It's got to be very different. And by the way, the NCAA was going in a different direction. You could see the train had already left the station on that, and so it's an incredibly dynamic area and ever changing, and will continue to change. And just as we didn't know when we started what it's going to be looking like, I think similarly, we still don't know what it's going to be in another 5 years. I know enough to know that all of us are still going to have a thriving esports program that's doing a real good service our members and for our competitors. But we still don't know necessarily what some of that is going to look like, and that's pretty cool about it all. Let me ask you this, because you all are used to dealing with your athletic directors, and each of them are dealing with what's in front of them in their athletic departments. My guess is at least some of your schools are that this is not necessarily operating within the athletic department. And can you talk about how you navigate that in a conference office, and maybe the best way to handle that, or do you have preferences? Do you try to steer them one way or the other? And just talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. The majority of our schools are not under the athletics umbrella. We have one institution that perhaps by next year will be under the auspices of athletics, but most of them are in other departments across campus. Right. One of the things that has helped us is that we have support from the president's office. And so in order to participate in Mountain West events, you have to have an adult non-student administrator that oversees that, the eSport program. And that's where we get assistance with, eligibility checks and, what, please complete your roster, things like that. I don't know in the future, and it depends on, who's sitting in the athletics director's chairs, whether or not more esport teams will go under the umbrella of athletics. And I'm kind of indifferent in terms of whether it should, because I don't want esports to go down the road that some conventional sports have gone down with the NCAA. So we have a unique opportunity to kind of craft esports in a way that fits what esports is, as opposed to trying to fit it into a conventional athletics box, so to speak.
Right.
I think the success of our program and getting participation is exactly that. The fact that we're not tying it in necessarily to athletics and NCAA eligibility. Like Carolyn, we probably have 3 or 4 schools that are under athletics. And I know it puts them in a difficult position sometimes trying to make some decisions. I got a request recently to consider allowing part-time students to participate during this year, because some schools struggle sometimes to fill out all the games that they want to play with us. And we held off on that for now. We defer to the institution and say, what's your policy for those that are under student development or activities? What's your policy for allowing students to participate? And if you certify that they're eligible under your current policies, then that's good for us. I also think, and I was part of some of the conversations early on with the NCAA years ago about the NCAA getting involved as a Division II representative, and I was crossing my fingers that wouldn't happen, just because I think this needs time to grow, and expand.
Can I ask Bob a question, because you mentioned part-time enrollment, and one of the things that we've done here is that as a conference, we've just set eligibility standards, full-time enrollment, making progress towards your degree as the institution defines it. Are you guys doing something like that as well? Because we've gotten that part-time enrollment question and we've said no. Yeah,
no, I don't think we've gotten that far down the line, Carolyn, to ask for that. I think we kind of put it on the institution, but we do say that the student has to be a full-time. Now, they could be a full-time grad student, but they have to be full-time as from what the institution decides.
Yeah, our eligibility requirements are just as simple as can be. You have to be a full-time student in good standing.
Yes.
And after that, and that's about it. Now I think we wanted as few impediments to getting this thing rolling as possible in the outset. I do think as schools get more competitive, they will start to distrust one another, and that's why we have this 500-page NCAA manual, because schools distrust one another. But we're not there yet. Right now there's still a collective, let's move this forward. And the fact that the NCAA is not administering it, I think, is really helpful to the growth of it all. And yes, we allow grad students. We don't even have a 4 or 5 year clock. If you are full-time enrolled for 10 years in good standing, you can do, and why not? Why would we not say that that's okay? Now, eventually, like I said, we may change our minds if the schools require it. They say, no, this is crazy. Look what they're doing over there. We don't like, but I think we're still a long way from that. Alex, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything that really Carolyn has said. You're gonna have to forgive me. What was the original question? It's been a minute. I know. I'm sorry.
Well, just kind of what you set out to do, and then what maybe the realities of it are, but then I think was the basic original.
Yeah, so I mean, when we set out to do this, I mean, it was about creating opportunities for our schools. We've really left it up to, as far as talking about eligibility, it's very similar to what you all have been saying. We're trying to keep it as relaxed as possible because, we're trying to encourage people to sign up to play and have as many schools in the Big Sky participate as possible. We're trying to do our best, keep expanding, listening to our membership as far as what their needs are. I know as far as the athletics versus campus, we don't have any of our programs that are under athletics right now, and I think
none of them. Wow,
correct. Yeah, and I think both sides are fine with that for the most part. I think they like operating differently because, as you said, esports is different from your traditional, your softball, basketball, whatever sport it may be. It's just different. So, and that's what our schools have told us as well, and how they want to keep things separate.
Right. Now, I don't know if in 20 years that'll be different or not. I mean, there are so many economies of scale with an athletic department. You have facilities people, and you have the facilities to run the events, and you have, if eligibility rules ever get more stringent, you have a compliance office within your athletic departments. And as teams start to want to fundraise to increase their travel budget, you'll need fundraisers and all of those things you have in an athletic department. And I just wonder if long term it doesn't go back into athletics, but I don't see that anywhere in the near future at all. Another complicating factor perhaps is athletic director. Some athletic directors are still look a little askance at esports. I think maybe the older generation, perhaps, and I say that firmly, one of those older generations, so I think I can say that. But and also there's a Title IX issue here, which by the way, every time I say that, it applies whether it's inside the athletic department or out. However, athletic directors, in a way that maybe other administrators on campus are not, are being held to task for Title IX all the time. And so anything that messes with their numbers, they're immediately going to object to or manage accordingly. Whereas if it's outside the athletic department, they don't necessarily have to be worried about that. And maybe it falls in a gray area for the time being. Anyhow, but I wonder if long-term it doesn't come back within the athletic department. I'm not sure. We'll see. But certainly well more than half, but probably 65% of our schools or more, it's outside of the athletic department as well. How important are the in-person events? I know for us, when we started out, I think we had this notion that in-person was going to be everything, that it was in fact the goal, and like Carolyn was saying, combining it with a basketball tournament or some other athletics event, just to stimulate interest and more numbers and all of that was really important. And then COVID happened and esports kind of survived. Not only that, we continued to grow exponentially even sometimes during COVID without in-person events. Tell me how important the in-person part is compared to what's going on online.
Yeah, for us, in person is extremely important. There are obviously challenges with it, but it's the experience that you can provide for those student athletes. It's an experience that they'll remember down the line when they graduate. They may come back, maybe to a graduate school, or be a contributor to the institution because of the experience that they had. And so when we conducted our in-person event, we tried to conduct it in the same way that we conduct all of our championships, participation gifts. And we even did starting lineups for our esport teams where they, ran, down this red carpet and they were introduced, and the looks on their faces. The other thing the in-person event does is not just for our participants, but also for those folks behind the scenes. We have young casters who want to get some experience. You have individuals who want to get experience with production that are younger. So it provides an opportunity not just for our participants, but also for those behind the scenes. The challenge, for us is the in-person interest. When we conducted our event in conjunction with our Fan Fest, we had a lot of individuals attend. Probably most of them didn't really know what was going on, or they had a kid participating and they watched it. But our biggest challenge is, how do you get in-person attendance? We get a lot of, hits online, but we don't get as many in person as I would like to see. But, in terms of streaming, our numbers are pretty high.
The flip side of the situation is that our first couple of years we did in-person championship, and then we're forced to go online. And the positive, everything Carolyn said is true about the in-person for all those reasons. The other part, though, opened up the door for schools that don't have the resources that some others do to travel, to participate, that might have to make a decision of not to participate because they don't have the money. We as a conference aren't funding. Just like we don't fund championships for travel and things like that for our other sports. So that created the opportunity for schools that were further away to participate and win championships. And so we expanded, we offered more games, which meant more events. And then, so doing it online brought us into a whole different opportunity. I would love to say that we would go back to all in person or mostly in person, and we're investigating that now. The other part that we try to do, keep it on campuses, and more campuses are saying, well, it's a pretty big investment to run a championship also, whether it's equipment or space or, all those things. So it's a tough thing. We know we should go back to do more in person. I think that might take us a little bit longer to get that going, although our intent is this spring to do at least a couple of in-person championship events.
Yeah, being at a conference that has not had an in-person championship yet, that's the number one thing I hear about. When we first introduced esports in the conference, and kind of like what Bob was saying, our first title was League of Legends. We got on the call with all of our schools, and they said, "All right, cool. When's the in-person going to be?" And we're like, "Well, we're not there yet." But it's still the one thing that I do really hear about. Being in the Big Sky and playing for a Big Sky title means something to all of our schools, and something that they're really interested in continuing to do. They really want an in-person event, and we're working on the feasibility of that right now, especially with our basketball championships being in Boise, Idaho. There is the infrastructure in town that we could do something alongside our basketball championships. This past year, although it wasn't a championship, University of Montana actually hosted all of our schools in the area for a couple-day tournament, and that had an overwhelming positive response. So, there is that hunger to have an in-person tournament for sure.
Right, and we see it too, and we decided not to tie our in-person events to what we're doing online, so that a member could be a full member and win a championship on any of our online tournaments and never have to spend the money to go travel to one of our in-person. Our in-person events are separate, and they're only for the ones that want to enter the in-person events. And we we call them both champions, and it all works. And the state of New York gave us a real nice grant, $150,000 to run our in-person championships every year in Albany, and so we run them in Albany, but they're not related to the online events. So that's not an impediment. That extra cost doesn't prevent anyone from becoming a member. So we try to make the most of both. And now we're expanding. We're going to have actually Boise State's going to host an event for us out west, and we're going to have our in the fall, and in the spring we're going to have our in-person. Our East Coast in person as well. So we touched on enrollment, and I know so many of our schools. There's a variety of motivations for why colleges would want to get into esports, and some of it I think is it not wanting to be left out. That a president knows what another school is doing, and they're like, oh my God, let's not miss the boat in case this is something big. There's other things, but enrollment seems to be one of the strongest motivators, certainly among the smaller schools. Higher education, it's fair to say, it is undergoing some demographic changes and financial issues, and enrollment continues to be something that everyone is looking at. And so you want to talk about that, and maybe, I know that's certainly something among the D3 schools. Is it something along the Division I as well, and to what degree do you see that as a motivating factor, and to what degree do you see it as an actual benefit?
Yeah, I think, when we had our initial discussions, enrollment certainly was a motivating factor. I don't have any data to support how esports has impacted enrollment at our various schools. I'm sure each school can pull up the data, because I know, once the Mountain West said we were going to have esports and schools started to sponsor programs, anecdotally, I heard from our institutions that there was an uptick in enrollment. And I think and I don't know if it's a misconception or not, but I think a lot of institutions think if you introduce esports, then that's going to attract more STEM students, and it may attract some STEM students, but what we're seeing is not all of our esport participants are in STEM. Some of them have other career aspirations. It could be communications. Maybe they want to be behind the scenes. But I think enrollment is a huge factor. How it's impacted our programs, we would have to do some more research to figure that out.
In Division II, I think, again, as I said before, so many of our schools, all of our schools, whether they're public or private, are all tuition driven at some point or another. I think enrollment is important. I think, because this is still such a new thing, I think schools are trying to figure out, like Carolyn says, where do we go trying to find these students? I was talking to a coach a couple of years ago, or I'm not sure they were technically a coach of the team, but somebody that was put in that position at the school, and said, so where are you recruiting? And they said, well, we do a great job of putting flyers up around campus and asking kids if they want to join. So I think there's some disconnect in there of where we bring this sport, another step forward, where you have people that are actually recruiting future college students to come to their schools. But just as important, I think, is that retention aspect, which is, I think we're almost now at the point where many schools or students that go to school are just expecting there to be an esport program. Whether that comes under auspices of a varsity sport on campus or student activity or what, but for a lot of these students, they want to be part of something. And we know that that's a really big aspect of this whole of the esports thing. And so I think part of it is that retention, that, here's something else that we offer, because I think it's been said before, I would say within the next few years, every campus is going to have some sort of program or another, whether they're official or, like you said, Dan, they might be, five people that got together and say, we want to play this game. But so retention's a big aspect too.
Yeah, I mean, enrollment is obviously a big issue, I think, at every school across the nation, no matter what size, especially with COVID producing a decline in enrollment, I'd say across the board. I'm not sure how much esports and for our schools really um, cause an uptick or any change in enrollment. I know our stance is that we want to provide an opportunity and an add-on for our schools so you can say, hey, if you do come and you play, you have a chance to play for a Big Sky title, the same that if you were a football player or a basketball player. So, that's really what our goal has been from the start is something that the presidents don't have to worry about. They don't have to be too involved. It's just we're providing an extra benefit for those schools being in our conference.
Dan, can I ask a question just on the retention piece? Because one of the things that we're starting to see is transferring among our esports student athletes, and it's almost like an NCAA deal where someone's recruiting them away from some of our schools, and so questions have come up about whether we have recruiting rules, and we want to keep our good players here, and we want them to graduate from our schools, and the transfer piece is starting to impact our retention.
Right. Have either of you seen that, Alex or Bob?
No, but as you're saying that, Carolyn, I'm saying, see, it's starting now. This is like Dan said, is that when people start getting upset that somebody's getting an advantage, that's when the rules start getting more and more.
Correct.
Yeah,
and
okay.
we haven't seen it, although we haven't seen that in particular, although it's conceivable. I mean, our esports director, Lydia, is so involved in this, and she knows the school. She knows all the people at all the schools, and maybe she's heard it more than I have. We have heard among our more elite programs, we have heard some of the sniping that I used to work at the Pac-12, and you'd hear it about someone talking about USC or Washington or just off the. We're starting to hear just a little bit of that. Not a ton of it, but I agree. I think it will be increased over time. And the question is, what will we do about it? And it's one thing. You have at the conferences. You have the interconference transfer rule and all that. Would you? But the age-old question, and when I was at the Pac-12, it was the same thing. Well, why would we want to? If somebody wants to transfer from USC to Washington, we're going to preclude that. So then they're going to go to Tennessee or Texas or something, and then we lose them. And so you can look at it that way. The other way is there's really no NCAA here, and so there's no one that can press a button and impose a rule on all schools that you can't poach another one. So there's a couple fascinating aspects about that with respect to esports that will be interesting to see how they play out.
Yeah, I mean,
Carolyn, are there of the schools that are mentioning that? Are they advocating something? Are they proposing a way to deal with it?
No, of course not. It's just someone got our player or recruited them away. I know. I'm a part of RSAA, and one of the things that we're talking about from a riot perspective are these types of things. And I'd be curious as to whether other developers are also talking about, should there be recruiting rules? Should there be eligibility rules that are consistent? And in this case, it would be with a particular developer. My bigger question I've posed is, in different formats or different situations is, is there such a thing, or could there be such a thing as a organization that had oversight of certain rules that could impact all of esports without infringing on the intellectual property rights of the developers? Eligibility, recruiting, and playing and practice seasons come to mind, as well as student athlete mental health. If we could all collectively agree to be consistent with that help.
Right. I mean, you'd certainly need buy-in from everyone. It would have to be instead of being top down imposed on them, it would have to just be consensual. Yes, we agree with these values and we sign on to it as well. Yeah, and you may have outliers that don't, and what happens there?
And pie in the sky would be developers would agree to collaborate with one another so that there are certain very baseline rules that apply to everyone across the board. Again, pie in the sky, because that way, if you want to play the game, you have to meet these requirements.
Right. And so I mean, thanks for raising the issue of developers. It's very different than volleyball or baseball, or no one. James Naismith doesn't own the rights to basketball, and you need his permission, and that led us from the get-go to try to offer a ton of offerings, because if we were married to one or two particular developers and they just kind of said, no, we're taking our ball and going home, we would still survive. Do you guys want to talk about your approach, your philosophy of dealing with the developers, and anything you want to add about that?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that we do before we even decide what game we're going to play is I have a meeting with all of our eSport administrators. And one of the things that we try to be mindful of is how the board would see how the institution is being represented. And are there certain games that we would not play because it might shine a negative light on the institution? So we're mindful of that. And then in terms of working with the developers, I do that here at the conference office. And I want to make sure before we play the game that we have the right to play the game in certain circumstances. If the way that we're conducting an event falls outside of, for example, community guidelines, then I would go directly to the developer and go through the process to conduct our event. So all of the developers that I've worked with so far have been really, really good, and they've worked with us on what we've wanted to do and helped us when we needed to, especially early on, when we're creating our events. But it's always on an annual basis, or every couple years, I will make sure that we're following all the rules that we need to, and the developers have been really positive for us.
Good.
We last year we started our relationship with Generation E, which has been really beneficial to us because that kind of covers us with a lot of the games and a lot of that background. Early on, like Carolyn was saying, we had we pursued licenses with Riot, and we tried to go down the line on all of them. And then again, starting last year, this partnership with Gen E is beneficial to us because that kind of, I think, covers that for us too. And maybe, again, we're not a super high profile conference in terms of this, although some of our teams do well. I think the other part about this is that maybe not exactly to answer your question, Dan, but this landscape again is so different from everything else that I'm used to in traditional sports. So that we have teams that play with us, but are also playing in the ECAC, the NECC, other leagues and things like that, which is good with us. That's right. What we want. We want more participation. We want schools to have that ability to self-determine where they want to be and what teams will play what. But it really does sometimes cloud the issue a lot, and it's confusing to know who's in for what and that kind of thing. So we don't get too much into the weeds with the licenses and those arrangements because of how we run our activities. And that ability to partner with Jenny, and actually CSMG was the ones that helped us with that. That was a big that took us up a real notch, I think.
Right. I think partnerships can make or break an effort. Our CSMG partnership has been terrific for us, and it really took us from a mom and pop operation to a much more professional operation. And then LeagueSpot is our platform, and they've just been phenomenal as well. So without those two entities, it's fair to say we wouldn't be nearly what we are today in esports. I think we're getting toward the end here. Anything else that we haven't covered that you think, just in terms about the future, or anything specifically you want to say about about what you're doing, or just how you see this going? Any like parting thoughts that you have?
Couple of things. I mentioned the student athlete mental health. We need to track on that too. And then would like to see more diversity, more diverse teams, not just with the teams, but with all of those around that. And I think as esports starts to grow and becomes, from a collegiate perspective, more mainstream, I think that will happen a little bit organically. But I think we need to really make efforts toward diversity and student athlete mental health would be my two things.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and something I think that sometimes in esports gets lost a little bit to the side. Diversity, I think we all know that efforts have to be really strengthened of trying to bring more women on the collegiate end into esports and keeping track of that, encouraging that involvement, giving opportunity. What I would love to see is more partnering between conferences that are involved, of doing crossover type activities that I think could expand opportunities, but also kind of be controlled over, like-minded groups, people that think are important. We have this arrangement that we've done for the last 4 years with the Peach Belt Conference, another Division II, where we do crossover events, which we found to be interesting, and also brings more attention to it. And the final piece I'll say is that recruitment piece, that we've talked about. Enrollment's important, but I would love to see, and I know there's groups out there getting involved, but love to see opportunities that the conferences could work together, or whether it's working with junior colleges or high schools, to come up with a way to expose potential students to more opportunities. Not necessarily scholarship, but just opportunities to play at a school that would be a good fit for you. So I think that's going to expand in the future, in the coming years. But I know that's, like I said, that would be a lot more efficient than putting up a flyer in the cafeteria and seeing somebody might want to play. It would be having that outlet to find those students that would be interested in your school.
And then my couple things that were hit on is diversity is probably our biggest thing in the conferences. We want to see more opportunities for our kids across all of our campuses. And then really, from a big sky, we want to keep building, especially move our bottom teams up, whether it's help creating more funding for them, attracting more students and retaining them, and then having, especially our top teams, more national opportunities as well. So that's what we're looking to do here at the Big Sky.
On the diversity issue, with respect to gender, we've tried a number of things, and with mixed success. One thing we're doing on the 10th and 11th of September, we're having a women's all-star showcase. So we've done things specifically with women's teams, and sometimes struggle to get enough women's teams to have a viable tournament. But so we changed that up. The nice thing is we have so many schools that we're putting together all-star teams, so you don't have to be on the same campus as someone else. So we have these women's all-star teams that are going to take each other on, and we're just trying anything, that has gotten some nice attention, and it's got something to it. So we're doing that on the 10th and 11th of September, and we're excited about that. But I do think, I'm not suggesting that answers the issue. No, it's a long and a challenge, I think, for all of us to get those numbers better. Absolutely. So I thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your time. I love what each of you are doing in this area. If there's any way that we can ever help you, let us know. I think when we started this, in all of us 5-6 years ago, there were some organizations jumping into this that were saying, you got to be part of us and you can't be part of anybody else. And I happen to love what Bob just made reference to, it all works. If somebody wants to be involved in their conference and then get involved with us, even for one game, or maybe for 10 games, whatever, and also be involved in other things, that's fine. Just it all works, and it's all building something that gets better every year, even in COVID. So I appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness that you put toward this, and look forward to the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dan. Great job.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Dan Coonan from the ECAC, Carolyn Henry from Mountain West. We had Alex Kelly from Big Sky and Robert Drainoff from the East Coast Conference. That was an amazing commissioners roundtable as we rounded out day 2 here. Great panel, well done, of the Collegiate SMG Directors and Coaches Summit 2022. Once again, I'm your host, Paulie Hype, like always. That's going to round out day 2, but don't forget, we are going to have the Discord breakout sessions, which is the third and final part of day number 2, the all hands on deck public group speakings. So our first breakout session is going to be licensing apparel and merchandise for your program. That will be with CSMG's Jim Connolly and Esports Gear Tommy Waters. They do all the jerseys, a lot of the jerseys for a lot of collegiate college esports divisions, excuse me. Then we have optimizing live productions with CSMG's head of production, Kyler Tandle. Excellent there. And then selling local sponsorships with also CSMG's Kevin McIntyre. So without further ado, head on over to discord.gg/esportsu. We have the link in our link tree. We have the link in our Twitter. We have the link in our Twitch. And we're going to have our breakout sessions over there. If you can't see them, make sure to go into the roles category and select the Collegiate Esports Coaches and Directors role. You'll then be able to see those groups if you cannot see them and have not selected that role. So without further ado, that's going to round out day 2. Tomorrow we have day 3. We'll see you back at 4 p.m. EST for day 3 of the Collegiate SMG Coaches and Directors Summit 2022, presented by EsportsU and Esports Foundry and sponsored by New Street. Collect wisely. That's going to do it for day number 2. We'll see you next time right here.